We are live. Not quite. We are buffering, I am told. Thank you. We are live now, and I'm sure we all feel the better for it. My name is Councillor Peter Clark, and I am the chair of this committee and will be chairing the committee this evening. Members and officers, please raise your hand to indicate you wish to speak. Please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. Please can I also ask that any questions are kept brief and to the point. I would also like to remind ward councillors to sit separately at the back from the committee while their applications in their ward are being considered and voted on by the committee. So, moving on to the agenda, item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence and substitutions. Kim.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Jackie Keane, Councillor Julian Spence and Councillor Phoebe Sullivan.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting. Can I ask members of the committee to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of May and published on the Council's website as the correct record of the meeting? Agreed. Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Kim.
None received, Chair.
Do we have any declarations from the room? None that I can see. Question 4. Sorry, agenda item 4, question from members of the public. We have one question this evening submitted by Mr. Peter Goodman relating to the first application on the agenda. If Mr. Goodman is online, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll read out the question then. My name is Peter Goodman, I'm from Farnham Cycle Campaign. So we put in a formal objection to this planning application for the industrial estate on Water Lane in Farnham. I believe now that many of the requests that we put into our formal objection are now going to be included. That's what I've heard unofficially. However, there is still a gap in some of the provisions that are being made in terms of cycle infrastructure. And people only use cycle networks if they form a network and they don't have significant gaps. So I believe there is a cycle track currently on the south side of Water Lane, east of Sainsbury's roundabout, but it is rarely used because it is actually stranded on its own, and it also doesn't go all the way down to the Sainsbury's roundabout. It stops short of that. So therefore, I'd like to request to the committee that either A, they finish off this cycle track so that it continues right down to the Water Lane roundabout with a proper 3-metre wide piece of tarmac, or option B, it is moved to the north side of Water Lane. And that would, you could actually move the road carriageway as well, so you wouldn't need to affect the vegetation on either side of Water Lane Road. Moving the existing cycle track would mean it can be used for, firstly, to connect the New Green Lane housing estate to Farnham Town Centre via a continuous route. Secondly, connect the Farnham Town Centre to the sports facilities on Monkton Lane. Thirdly, connect Webburn Road area to Farnham's largest supermarket, which is Sainsbury's Water Lane. And fourthly, connect the new industrial estate to people living to the east of it. All of these 4 benefits could be obtained from option B, which is to move the cycle track to the other side of Water Lane. And these benefits, we believe, would all help with Farnham's current car congestion problems. So our request is, could we have either option A or B, and B provides many more benefits? That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Goodman. Now, normally we would address the questions from members of the public at this point in the meeting, but I'm informed by the case officer that he's going to specifically address your question during his presentation. So if you bear with us, we should get an answer to that. Item 5 is questions from members. I've been told that there are no questions submitted by members this evening, so we can move on to item 6, which is relevant updates to government guidance or legislation since the last meeting. I will ask the Executive Head of Planning and Development to update us on any changes to legislation. Thank you.
Chair, there are no updates this evening.
Thank you. Item 7, appeals decisions. In your agendas this evening, pages 11 to 36, I would ask the members of the committee to note the appeals decisions set out there and ask if there are any questions. No, so that is noted. Thank you. So we now move on to applications subject to public speaking. And the first one is WA 2025-00001, Land at Farnham Sewerage Works. The erection of 3 industrial warehouse buildings with open storage yards, associated access, car and cycle parking, infrastructure and landscaping. I'll now hand over to the officer, who is Sam Wallace.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So the next application is WA 2025-00001. It's for the 3 industrial warehouse buildings and includes a central spinal road, new access off the Sainsbury's Water Lane roundabout. Buildings include service areas and yards, as well as associated landscaping and cars and cycle parking. So the site is a 4.9 hectare undeveloped parcel of scrubland located to the northeast of Farnham. To the immediate north of the site is the Farnham Water Treatment Works, accessed off Monckton Lane to the east. The application site previously formed part of the water treatment works, although it is no longer operationally required. To the south of the site is Water Lane, which includes a smaller roundabout serving the Sainsbury's supermarket and Farnham Trading Park, with a number of industrial commercial buildings. Further to the south is the Shepherd and Flock roundabout with access onto the A31 dual carriageway. So in planning policy context, the subject site is a strategic site allocated for business development in both the local plan Part 1 and the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. Policy SS9 of the local plan Part 1 allocates the 4.9 hectare site for Class B employment uses, subject to the following achievement of satisfactory access arrangements, maintenance of a buffer screen along Monckton Lane, and appropriate mitigation being undertaken for any contamination found on site. It's also allocated in policy FMP 18 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. Buildings should be of a high quality design and fit in well with adjacent business uses on the Farnham trading estate. Existing landscape around the edge of the site, including the screen along Monckton Lane, should be retained and enhanced. Vehicular access should be taken from the Water Lane roundabout. So in terms of the planning history, outline consent for all matters reserved except access was granted in 2020 for a change of use to open storage and general industrial uses with associated buildings and access off the existing Sainsbury's roundabout on Water Lane. This consent has now lapsed as a result of reserved matters application not being submitted within 3 years of the date of the decision. It is noted that the outline consent included a land use and height parameters plan, which did indicate a maximum height of all buildings of 15 metres. So this is a significant material planning consideration and should be factored into the assessment of this application. So in terms of views on site, this is a view looking across the site southwest from the existing entrance to the site off Monckton Lane. This is looking northwest from the centre of the site towards the water treatment works at one of the silo tanks. You've got another view there looking southwest to northeast. So this is a view looking from the junction of Monckton Lane down Water Lane, with the Farnham Trading Park to the left of the picture. And then this is standing on the south of Water Lane towards the Sainsbury's roundabout. You can see the existing 3-metre shared, wide shared footway that's recently been completed. And as I will discuss it does tie into the highway works agreed in this application. This is looking from the Sainsbury's supermarket exit of the roundabout towards the north, where the new northern arm of the roundabout would be. And then finally, as you head towards the Shepperton Flock roundabout, this is the existing treed frontages that will be largely retained with the new shared footway to the north of the road. So this is the proposed site plan. Units 1 and 3 would be in Class B8 storage and distribution and associated Class E office use. Unit 2 would be in wholly Class B8 use. The buildings are accessed off the Sainsbury's Water Lane roundabout with the new central road with the associated service areas, yards, landscaping and car and cycle parking. So this is a underground constraints plan, so it gives you an idea of the specific underground constraints and restrictive covenants on the site that have shaped the layout of the scheme. These do include a 3-metre culvert where they've got to require a 3-metre easement to that culvert at the front of the site on an east to west axis. You've got covenants on buildings to the rear of the site, as well as a number of underground gas and water mains, which has informed the layout. This is the street scene plan, so you can sort of get indicative elevations from Water Lane with the site entrance and appearance amongst the treed frontages that will be largely retained. I think a clearer view would be this aerial plan shown here with aerial views looking across the site from the southeast. Heights of each buildings are Unit 1 to the left is 15.25 metres, Unit 2 is 16.3 metres, and Unit 3 is 15.5 metres. As discussed, the height and parameters plan set a 15-metre height limit, so it's only 1.3 metres in difference to that outline consent. You could see how that relates to surrounding uses, including the sewage works to the north and the Farnham Trading Park to the south. They are large buildings, but by their nature as warehouse storage business use, it does require minimum internal height requirements, as discussed in the report. Roofing will include solar panels, and there will be substantial planting on both the Monckton Lane boundary to the east and along the Water Lane elevations, as well as the Spinal Road. So here you can see the agreed highways improvements plan that went through a stage 1 road safety audit. The works will be sealed in a legal agreement and include all benefits listed in section 3 of the officer's report in the heads of terms section. The works are necessary, reasonable in scale and directly related to the development in accordance with the NPPF. In terms of the question from the member of the public, the works will in fact connect up to the existing footway that was previously shown. You've got I do mention it within section 22 of the report, where we discuss about why it cannot run along the full northern length of Water Lane beside Unit 2 and 3. It's unfeasible because it would directly harm the RPA of a number of trees shown to be retained and would not allow for suitable tree planting on this frontage to provide a further green buffer, and the units cannot be moved back further on the plot given the underground constraints plan. And you've also got that culvert at the front of the site that does require a 3-metre easement. The cycle path does connect to the Toucan crossing that's recently been installed. It would be along the north. You'd have a shared crossing point across the northern arm of the roundabout, another shared crossing across the eastern arm, and then a widened verge to feed into that new footway that was mentioned by the applicant. So hopefully we've addressed his concerns. In terms of the main matters of consideration, No statutory consultees have objected to the proposal. In terms of design, as mentioned in the officer's report, given that the scale and massing of the units responds to modern internal processes for a Class B8 storage distribution use, and given site context adjacent to a sewage treatment works, industrial trading park, Sainsbury's supermarket and the A31 dual carriageway, the design would be acceptable, and we have to be mindful of that previous outline consent. In terms of the flood risk contamination, the Environment Agency, the lead local flood authority and Environmental Health have reviewed all relevant reports and do not object to the development, subject to a number of planning conditions. On trees, the tree officer also does not object to the development subject to conditions. Treed frontages would all largely be retained where possible. Highways and access, Highways Authority do not object, and the proposal as stated includes all of the highways works and contributions listed in the heads of terms in section 3 of the officer's report. So in full, the report identifies the application would be in accordance with the relevant development plan policies. Officers are therefore recommending that following completion of a section 106 agreement and subject to conditions 1 to 30, that the proposal is granted. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Sam. We have 3 speakers on this application. The first is Mr. James Wright. If you'd like to come in and take a seat. You have 4 minutes from when you start to speak. You can switch the microphone on by the middle switch, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. My name is James Wright and I'm speaking in support of this application. Members are aware that this site did previously have planning permission obtained by the former owners in 2020, but that permission did not properly address the constraints and it expired without being implemented. Jobs were never created, businesses never located here, a lost opportunity. I'll briefly outline the 2 key factors that have influenced this new application, and I'll conclude by stating that this proposal is fundamentally sound and should be approved. The 2 areas I'd like to highlight are the site constraints and the design solutions. Firstly, the site constraints. There are various constraints we've had to address in formulating these proposals. Number 1, there are a series of underground buried pipes below the soil. These areas cannot be built upon. That means the siting of buildings can only be accommodated within the locations shown on the master plan. Number 2, to meet the requirements of adopted policy SS9, the central access road can only feasibly be located in one position, centrally, and the choice of siting of the buildings is limited to meet policy requirements to maintain a buffer screen. Number 3, being adjacent to the sewage works means there is a standoff zone to ensure clean air, free from odour. This area cannot be built upon, and it dictates the siting of buildings and any office accommodation. Number 4, this development represents a £50 million private sector investment and an opportunity for 200 new jobs, generating £500,000 of business rates annually. To realise these benefits, it's essential that the development meets the requirements of modern business. That means the buildings must have private yards, large clear floor plates, and crucially, they must have tall, clear internal heights to accommodate manufacturing, production, and high-tech storage systems. So now I move to the second key issue, design solutions. To address the buried pipes, the buildings have been sited centrally within the plot. To accommodate the central access road, 2 development plots are created either side. To accommodate the requirements for clean, fresh air, the offices are sited at the southern aspect away from the sewage works. To meet the needs of modern business, the scheme provides the required yards, clear internal height and clear floor plates. One of the buildings in the proposal, Unit 2, has an occupier already waiting to move in and start trading, proving that this development will deliver on its promises. The master plan layout comprises 3 individual buildings, and the disposition of those buildings breaks up any sense of scale and provides visual interest in the transition between them. The design includes the positioning of the offices at the front of the site to give visual interest and an active frontage, offering a sense of arrival, open for business. The colour tones for the building elevations have been selected to focus the eye towards ground level, lighter tones higher up. The landscaping includes retention and reinforcement of the existing planting, new perimeter hedging, and the introduction of trees to provide a corridor for wildlife and to shelter any views from the north. Cycleway enhancements and a financial contribution have been agreed with the Highways Department at the County Council to enhance cycleway connectivity. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, tonight's our opportunity to put right the failings of the 2020 application. It's an opportunity to deliver £50 million of private sector investment, 200 new jobs, generate £500,000 of business rates annually, and attract new businesses to the wonderful town of Farnham. This application provides quality design, which addresses the site constraints. It meets the needs of modern businesses, and it responds well to its local setting, as evidenced in the images we saw earlier. Cycleway enhancements are included. I'd ask you to agree with your officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. We now have a speaker who's going to speak on behalf of the Farnham Town Council, and I believe that is Councillor David Beeman.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm here tonight to speak as the collective voice of Farnham Town Council. Farnham Town Council has not formally objected to this application. I'd like to make that quite clear. But nevertheless, we have a number of issues on which we still have some serious concerns. The development site is currently a vacant grassed site and is contaminated. The proposed development will not increase flooding in the area, which, as people will know from local people know, is quite prevalent, even when in most of the time. Farnham Town Council has noted that the site is close to the Nadder stream and other tributaries running via Bourne Mill, flowing into the River Way, a sensitive location within the Way and Tributaries Management Catchment. Mitigating the impacts of surface water runoff and contamination is vital. Consideration should be given to rainfall water capture and with expansive roofs across 3 buildings and large open storage yards. Monkton Lane to the north-east of the site regularly floods, as I've said. Highway improvements for the drainage of surface water and roads around the site must be agreed with Surrey Highways, along with the maintenance of culverts around the vicinity. Indeed, a condition is required for the need of maintenance of the culvert of the development and takes much of the stormwater from the north-east of Farnham. I would also like to say we support the comments made by Peter Goodman in some sentences, in that the measures to expand the pedestrian and cycle provision to link with new and existing infrastructure must be provided to support this development, connect with the wider industrial and residential areas beyond. And then we note that £80,000 of Section 106 is being provided, but we regard that as being insufficient to install the required cycle and pedestrian improvements, infrastructure improvements, and that still funding will be needed to apply for. On a pedantic point, we believe that if you look at conditions, certainly 8 and 9, there should be references to condition 6 has been incorrectly referenced. That's a pedantic point. In short, we do not object to their application, but we do believe that these measures should be taken in the conditions, stronger conditions, for the as proposed regarding cycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and certainly the maintenance of a culvert. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beeman. We have a third and final speaker, who is the Ward Councillor, Councillor Richard Steiger.
Thank you, Chair. I've significant concerns around this application, even though it is in the neighbourhood plan, and I'm generally supportive of commercial activity, and it has in the past already received outline planning permission. However, this development is huge, much larger than the previous application at 4.9 hectares, as opposed to previously 2.9 hectares. An increase in apex roof height, as we heard, from 15 metres to 16.3 metres, and with almost 20,000 square metres of industrial floor space, a 5-fold increase in the proposed building will tower over other commercial buildings in the area, and which represents an unacceptable intensification of development. The proposed oversized units sit a mere 5 metres away from the roads in places, making effective screening almost impossible. The buildings are twice as large as the previous proposal, and most of the rest of the land will be concreted over for parking. The pre-existing drainage problems will be further exacerbated with surface water having nowhere to go other than the existing disused culvert, which will likely be overwhelmed. The southeastern corner of the site, nearest Monkton Lane, has well-documented surface water issues. And as for Water Lane, the clue is perhaps in the name. The proposal will add to the traffic congestion, with articulated lorries adding to the already crowded street scene. There's insufficient provision, as we've heard, for cycle and footpaths, especially on the northern side of Water Lane. Allegedly, this isn't possible to protect trees, but we already know that 22 trees will be cut down in this proposal. This application is just too big for the plots, representing an over-intensification of development of the site, and it should be scaled back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steiger. Perhaps one of the members of the committee may wish to ask the case officer what measures are being taken with regard to drainage. So we will now open up this application for debate amongst the committee. Councillor Coburn, followed by Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's very exciting. Farnham is at a crossroads, like most of the places in the borough at the moment. If you walk down the street, it's a very sad sight. And really and truly, we could almost do with a sort of town centre, you know, big sort of master plan to get the whole thing sorted. We've got shops that will have to be repurposed one way. We've got old industrial sites which will have to be repurposed probably. And here we have a site that was allocated in both the local plan, part 1, and in the neighbourhood plan. And we allocated it for employment because of where it sits. Anyone who's got a child has taken them to play football, probably along Monkton Lane, to the Stinky Pitch, which is to this day what I know it as. You know, where am I taking you today, dear? The Stinky Pitch, as opposed to the one that was a bit more fragrant. You know, we have to be realistic here. We have a site that is next to a big industrial site, which is struggling at the moment in certain ways. We've got modern buildings, and, you know, I'm not a great lover of most of them, but I actually think these probably will sit well in the site. They have promised the improvements to the cycleway and obviously some form of screening. We're not going to screen these buildings totally, but you can certainly improve them as you go past other industrial sites, big and small. You see what they've done in terms of landscaping, and they do soften the buildings. And bringing the active frontage of the offices to the fore, I think, is a good idea, because there is something rather soulless about some of the big storage units. So, you know, I think given where we are, given that we've had the outline planning, given that this is an allocated site, given the list of conditions, because certainly the officers have taken into account all the things like the flooding. I mean, you can't ignore the flooding because you drive through it to get to the Stinky Pitch. So, you know, we are all aware of the issues around here, but if they can be, if the conditions can be firm enough to mitigate the effect of this, because obviously the more we concrete over, the more, you know, we exacerbate the problem of surface water flooding. But, you know, given the situation, I think this is quite exciting, and I hope it succeeds. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rubini.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Could you show up the slide for the roundabout entranceway, please?
Is it that one?
No, I mean the schematic. Yes, that's the thing. On my laptop here, obviously I've got that. If you could enlarge it, could you explain what all those pink dots, chevrons and goodness knows what it's all about? I don't quite understand what you're trying to show us.
So that one's quite a detailed highways improvement plan, but those sort of chevrons across the roundabout, their visibility displays, that's probably more detailed than you might need. But the main point of that plan is to show that sort of the hatched grey area you see along the, so that's going to be the new cycleway.
Where's that?
Sorry, if you can see my cursor there, the hatched part in front of the trees here. So that will be the new cycleway. So
what's that pink bit just in the end of that track there, and
here,
the two on the circle?
These are visibility displays for HGVs exiting the northern arm access. So it won't look like that, but there's sort of visibility lines for any driver exiting that access point.
So HGVs and cycleway will mix, or is there separation? I'm still confused.
Well, you've got the arms here where it will be a standard crossing, and there's the expanded crossing here, and a cyclist would be going down this cycle path, crossing over the street, crossing over here, and then joining this cycle path that's here.
As long as they're law abiding.
As long as they're law abiding, yes.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, sections 17 and 19 are the two that I feel most energised by. But at the same time, I think this is a good project. I think it's good for Farnham. And I think overall, yes, let's do it. But, and all I would say in this case, I mean, all projects are the same. And when we look at applications, they're all the same. But I would just really ask that the conditions are very carefully kept to, particularly on drainage. That area is a real problem, that area. That's not a reason not to build on it, but it's a real problem, and it will need, a lot of careful planning and care with that. The other problem that I've got, and I don't know whether you have data, Sam, but it's traffic flow. I mean, I remember seeing this when it did come to planning Farnham as consultee, and the same question arose as the traffic flow. And whilst it would appear that a tenant is already found, I don't know if all the tenants are found, but how does one control that traffic flow? If you have a tenant that has a lot of storage and a lot of traffic movements, that area is already very congested. On a Saturday morning, it's no-go from the roundabout up to Sainsbury's. It's really absolutely for that. Now, admittedly, they won't necessarily be working on a Saturday, but it is the same at certain times during the week. It's a very busy area. So is there any, and forgive me, there's probably a condition there which I haven't spotted, but is there any control or management as regards the volume of traffic that can go in and out of the development?
There's no control over the amount of traffic that could use the sort of warehouse distribution use. Obviously, there's a finite amount of space, but as part of the consultation process, they did, Surrey Highways Authority did ask for updated traffic generation information. They provided further data, so they did 5 different traffic points, and they did include 3 current developments: Hawthorns, Monkton House, Farnham Park Cemetery, and calculated that in as part of that traffic generation. They were content that there was adequate capacity on the highway network for this development. They haven't objected, subject to the conditions listed in the report.
Okay, sometimes a little bit sceptical about highways waving things through, but that's not for me to say. Okay, all right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chairman. No, I certainly accept, as Councillor White and as Councillor Coburn has said, and the applicant has said, that this is in many ways a very good application for the town. But I also sympathise with the comments that Councillor Steiger has made. That just seems that little bit too big, actually. If it was a bit smaller, it could accommodate a proper cycle path, as the member of the public Peter Goodman has said. And I don't see why it shouldn't be a bit smaller, actually. There is a comment on page 61 that says if there was any significant reduction in the size of the units, that would make the scheme economically unviable. I didn't see anything in the application to support that, actually. Could the officer tell us where is there any evidence to support that comment, actually? That's my first question, if I may.
So obviously the site is working against the constraints they have. In terms of the sort of economic viability of the site, obviously we had negotiations regarding Section 106 contributions, and there's only so much they can provide in that regard. If we were to shrink the floor area of the site further, then it would push it into maybe an unviable development. That was my comment there, but there were other reasons why the cycle path couldn't be located at that particular position.
But members, this evening, we're not advising you on the viability of a smaller scheme because we do not have a smaller scheme before us, and we don't have any information on the economics of the scheme because it's not material at this point to the determination of the application.
If I can come back on that, Chairman. I mean, in the applicant's documentation, he made it clear that there'd been several previous evolutions of this scheme. It was about 5 or so before, and they were mainly smaller. And in fact, the original application that was approved was something like 5 times smaller in terms of the capacities of the scheme, and presumably that was seen to be viable at the time. I accept that we're looking at the scheme as it is, actually, but we can comment on it. And I don't see why, as Councillor Steiger has said, it shouldn't be made just a little bit smaller. I don't necessarily mean in height. Maybe that height is necessary, but it could have been moved a lot. Slightly smaller buildings could be just that little bit further from the road, and that could allow the proper cycle path along the whole scheme. It was the original idea in the previous application. The one that was approved previously.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. But I think we are addressing the application that's in front of us. We don't have an alternative, but I appreciate your comment. Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's good if it's bringing employment to the area. And I hope it does, because having driven through Camberley today and seen lots of very empty, large buildings and buildings that haven't been there very long being knocked down, it's a bit of a shame. So hopefully they do have people interested in the sites, and I believe one person is already interested. I'm just concerned because we say about the height of the buildings. The height of Unit 2 is already 1.2 metres, I believe, above the 15 metres. But Unit 1 has a large storage area. Goodness knows what it's intended for. But would there be any restriction on the height of what they're storing? Because if it's just storage, it could be anything. Or is that additional maybe retail space? It doesn't really explain what they're going to do there. So that is a bit of a query from me, because obviously they could put things up an awful lot higher than 15 metres, which would be an eyesore. The crossing coming off of the roundabout, I wondered if you could just answer a question on that. Will that be controlled by lights? Because if you've got pedestrians trying to cross there and you've got HGVs going in and out, I would imagine lights would then snarl up the whole of that roundabout, which could cause problems. No lights could be difficult for pedestrians. All in all, I think Farnham probably do need more work placements. Just concerned about that outdoor storage, really, if it goes up to like a skyscraper. Thank you.
So the approved height, if you were consenting it today, is Unit 2 is the self-storage. That's 16.3 metres. The other heights were, 15.25 metres for Unit 1 and 15.5 metres for Unit 3. That would be the approved height. If they were to come in further, they wanted to extend it upwards, they'd have to come in for planning permission. It's unlikely that
Sorry, could I just say, I'm concerned about the outside storage next to Unit 1. There's a very large area for storage, I believe, from one of the things that we looked at. So how high can they store things?
We're just going to go back to the block plan to make sure that we're talking about the same area, and then we can advise you.
Yes, that's the one next to storage. To Unit 1, there's a large storage yard.
Yeah, what I suggest is that if members are concerned about potentially, you might have storage containers stacked on top of each other, which you sometimes see, then you could put a condition on to say that any open storage is at a maximum height of, whatever it is that you feel is appropriate.
Can I propose we do that? Put a condition on there for the height of nothing to be above the intended height of these buildings? Whatever the words are, Claire, please.
I think the answer is yes, and I think we can safely leave it to the case officers to do that. Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to support Councillor White's concern about about HGVs. And whilst I note what the officer is talking about, the highways view of the number of HGVs coming in and out of the new area, looking at the number of parking spaces of HGVs in the docking area on that map, it would suggest there's going to be potentially a huge number of HGVs who are going to be competing with customer shoppers at peak trading times. And I would suggest that we should ask for a condition about HGVs should only be able to access in or out outside the peak retail trading times. We know that that new roundabout, which has moved from 2 lanes to 3 lanes, has made a significant improvement on traffic moving on to the Shepherd and Flock roundabout, and that's been great. I think adding 1 HGV on that is going to really cause all sorts of problems. So I do have a big concern about restricting access and traffic, especially that's a pretty small roundabout as well for a 40-foot to be turning around there. So that's my concern. Thank you.
So members, just to give you some advice on that point, obviously if members were minded to suggest a condition, they would need to meet the tests and they would need to be reasonable and enforceable as 2 of the tests. Members, I would advise you that to allow an industrial estate and then say you can't deliver or leave that site over significant parts of the working day, I would suggest probably isn't reasonable. And also I'd question how enforceable it was, particularly in light of the fact that you have no highway objection. So members, I'll just leave you with that advice.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chairman. As HGVs have come up, I have a concern about HGVs in terms of the Sainsbury's roundabout. That's a very small roundabout, and if we're talking about these very large HGVs, are we totally convinced that they'll be able to safely navigate that very small roundabout?
So Highways Authority have gone through a stage 1 road safety audit that has been independently audited of the county highways, and then they have reviewed it with the transport consultants of the applicant. They are satisfied that the access arrangements are all acceptable. I would say that that roundabout is used. It's a large Sainsbury's superstore there. There's big HGV deliveries already using that roundabout, as well as the Farnham trading estate to the south. So yeah, there's no concern highways related.
I think we've taken the advice of the experts, the Highways Department, so I think we have to leave it with them. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, thank you. I think really the officer and Claire's covered it, but we seem to be forgetting the context here. You know, on that block plan we've just had, you have an industrial park with, as Sam has just said, lorries arriving, going in and out all the time. And then you have, you know, the sewage works immediately to the other side. I mean, we're not talking here about an area that doesn't have lots of HGVs. I mean, it is the big, well, say the biggest in Farnham, but certainly the big one on the other side of the road. So, you know, it's all about context, and in the context of the surroundings, this seems to me to be eminently sensible, and we put in an access from there because, you know, we looked at all the other possibilities, and you know, the lorries. I mean, the driving skills are just unbelievable of these people. Anyone who's watched them do what they do, I think we really are just splitting hairs here. In a situation where, as I say, it's an industrial site next to a sewage works and another industrial site. So, you know, what do we expect? You know, the Taj Mahal and a few little tuk-tuks or something, you know. I mean, we've got to be realistic about what we're looking at.
Thank you. If there are no other further questions, we will move to the recommendation that delegated authority is given to the Assistant Director of Planning, that following the completion of Section 106 agreement and subject to conditions 1 to 30, permission is granted. Sorry, 31 conditions. I would ask members to vote on the recommendation using the console in front of them and which is lit up.
Thank you, Chair. That's 8 in favour and 1 abstention, no one against.
So that is carried. Thank you, Kim. Now move to item 8.2 on the agenda, which is, excuse me, WA 2024-01134, land at Treetops, Maple Drakes Road, Ewhurst in Cranley. This is outline application, outline only for up to 14 dwellings, including access following the demolition of an existing dwelling. The officer is Russell Brown, so I will hand over to you, Russell.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening all. So this is an outline application at Treetops, which is the name of a dwelling on Maple Drakes Road in Ewhurst. As you can see, it is for 14 dwellings and includes a demolition of the existing bungalow on site. So that's a net gain of 13. Everything but access is a reserved matter. The site is on the east side of Ewhurst and also of Maple Drakes Road, just to the south of its junction with the glebe to the west. Existing vehicular and pedestrian access is off Maple Drakes Road. The existing bungalow is itself within the settlement boundary, but the rest of the site is not, as indicated by the black line and the red arrow showing exactly, well, approximately where the, oh, it's not up.
Sorry. It's not being shared. Thank you for that.
Oh, okay. Sorry about the lack of slides there. So just again, just the location on the east side of Ewhurst with access off Maple Drakes Drive. And then I was just saying the existing bungalow is
is itself within the settlement boundary indicated by the black line shown by the red arrow, but the rest of the site to the rear is not. The site, as well as the bungalow itself, comprises the rear garden and the land behind that, some of which used to be a plant nursery, and it backs onto ancient and semi-natural woodland. Within the woodland, there was a public footpath and Cobbler's Brook. So here's the red line boundary on the existing site plan. I would just note that the red line has been amended during the course of the application to exclude the brook, which is not within the applicant's ownership. And also the pond just to the rear of the dwelling has also been filled in. There is also a tree stocking zone to the north of the site. This is proposed as compensation for the previous removal of trees. And then just going to show you some images of the site. So you've got the existing bungalow, which is currently vacant. The middle image on the bottom there is a grass verge where a footpath is proposed. These photos are of a woodland and the Pontley Tunnel on site, which is just in the bottom left there. That's associated with former use of the site as a plant nursery. This slide just shows the woodland in more detail. This woodland, as well as being ancient and semi-natural, is designated as a site of nature conservation importance, which is just a local designated site chosen for its importance to wildlife. In terms of public access or public view, sorry, I should say, to the woodland, one would have to cross a bridge. The only purpose of that bridge is to access the gate onto the private land, i.e. the application site itself. And then you would have to stand at the gate for views of the site. The bridge is accessed via an informal path off the public footpath itself. Just moving on to the planning history on this particular site, which is a material planning consideration. This plan shows a scheme of 20 dwellings, which was dismissed at appeal following non-determination. The inspector broadly found 4 reasons to dismiss the appeal, which I'll summarise here. The wider spread of the proposed development than the existing development, given the amount of built form, its layout and the introduction of a central spine road, resulting in an alteration to the current linear pattern of development that would be out of place and cause adverse visual effect to the character and appearance of the area. The inclusion of gardens, an area of public open space and a play area within the buffer zone lead to concerns that the site could not accommodate the proposed development without a deterioration of broad-leaved woodland, a habitat of principal importance. Again, that is the ancient woodland I previously referred to. There was a lack of certainty that adequate mitigation was proposed to avoid unacceptable harm to protected species, especially bats, and the lack of a provision of a locally equipped area of play on site. Following that application, a scheme for 18 dwellings was then made, but ourselves as the council declined to determine it for a couple of reasons, which again I'll read out. There have been no significant change in the development plan that is material to the application or any other material considerations since the dismissal on appeal of the previous application in March 2023. The land development and the land to which both applications relate are the same or substantially the same. The character and appearance reason for refusal appears more of an in-principle issue, and the indicative plan submitted with this application is almost identical or 2 units less than the scheme dismissed at appeal. And then we move on to the application in front of yourselves members today. As stated, 14 dwellings are proposed. I would just ask you to note this is an indicative layout because layout is a reserved matter along with scale, appearance and landscaping. However, I would say that you do have an indicative landscaping plan in front of you. This shows a 25-metre buffer zone to the ancient woodland with containing sustainable drainage ponds and a 1.1 metre high post and rail fence There is also 2 play areas on site, landscape buffers and also tree planting. Also of relevance is that this is quite a sloping site, both up from the north to the south, both from the north up to the south, sorry, and from the west down to the east. And that is more pronounced. So the top indicative street scene elevation shows some more pronounced from east to west slope on the site. And then just on this slide, I thought it was useful to superimpose the proposed indicative layout on an aerial view of the site. So you can see the pattern of development in the locality when compared to the proposal. And then the recommendation is for refusal for the following reason. The outline proposal, by way of introducing discordant and built form on the site in an incongruous east-west pattern with a central spine road, would be out of place and cause an adverse impact on the visual amenity, character and appearance of a locality. Any mitigation proposed would not reduce this harm for a substantial length of time. As such, it conflicts with policy TD1 for local plan part 1 2018, policy DM4 of the local plan part 2 2023, and policies EEG3 and EEG4 of the Ewhurst and Ellens Green Neighbourhood Plan 2019 to 2032, which was made in May 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. We have 3 speakers on this application, and the first speaker is Jane Tuttle. I hope I pronounced that correctly. You have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I am here to strongly support the Office's recommendation to refuse the planning application for the development of 14 dwellings at Treetops, Maple Drakes Road. My name is Jane Tuttle. I live on Maple Drakes Road. This proposal is fundamentally at odds with the character and setting of Ewhurst. The site lies outside the defined settlement boundary in open countryside and directly adjacent to ancient and semi-natural woodland. It is a sensitive and ecologically valuable location, and this application fails to respect that. The proposed layout introduces a pattern of development that is entirely out of keeping with the existing houses on Maple Drakes Road. Even the applicant's own landscape and visual impact assessment acknowledges that this would cause what they describe as moderate to minor adverse visual impact. Even with their suggested mitigation, this harm would persist for up to 15 years. This is not a moderate or minor adverse impact, nor is it a temporary inconvenience. It is a long-term degradation of Ewhurst's rural landscape. The application also raises serious concerns about the impact on the adjacent woodland. The council's own tree officer has expressed strong objections, citing the proximity of dwellings to woodland trees, the risk of overshadowing, and the inevitable future pressure to prune or fell these trees. This is not just speculation, it is a foreseeable consequence of a poor site and poor site planning. We must also remember that this site has already been subject to unauthorised tree felling. Mature trees, including those forming part of a wildlife corridor, were removed without permission. This is deeply regrettable. It also undermines trust in the stewardship of the land and raises serious questions about the applicant's regard for environmental protections. The community in Ewhurst will be encouraging Forestry England to continue with their seeking of a restocking order on this site, and we would encourage the council to support this. This development would cause significant and lasting harm to the character, ecology, and visual amenity of the village. The development would urbanise a tranquil, wooded edge of Ewhurst and set a dangerous precedent for backland development alongside Maple Drakes Road. There is little benefit to outweigh this significant damage. The planning inspector has already dismissed a previous appeal on this site, and the fundamental issues remain unresolved. The revised scheme still fails to integrate with the village's character, still threatens Ewhurst's natural assets, and still imposes an inappropriate form of development on a sensitive site. In conclusion, this application is not sustainable, not sympathetic, and not suitable for approval. I would urge the committee to uphold the officer's recommendation and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second speaker is from the Parish Council, and it is Councillor James Bloomfield. You two have 4 minutes from when you start to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over 100 residents have made their objections known to Waverley Borough Council, and now the Parish Council of Ewhurst and Ellens Green would like to take this opportunity to state why we too are opposed to this application. Located mostly outside the defined settlement boundary, the site reflects an established linear pattern of development, with dwellings being sited along the existing road. This development would conflict with this existing pattern and would be out of place and harmful to the character and appearance of the area, and as such conflicts with policies EEG 3 and EEG 4 of our neighbourhood plan, which together seek to ensure that development enhances the local character of the area. While occupying an important elevated position, to the east the land falls away where it meets two sensitive ecological habitats, Cobbler's Brook and Ancient Woodland. Both habitats are used by Sayers Croft, our local environmental education centre, primarily because it has remained a peaceful, natural space and therefore helps provide a rural experience for visiting inner city children. Allowing a housing development to extend to the east and beyond the existing settlement boundary threatens the character of this uniquely sensitive area. If granted, this application has promised ecological and biodiversity enhancements, yet the finding of the biodiversity net gain reports concludes a biodiversity loss, requiring off-site enhancements to provide the required 10% net gain, and therefore fails to meet policy EEG 7 of our neighbourhood plan. Furthermore, the reported tree felling that occurred prior to the first application for this site in 2022 resulted in an investigation by the Forestry Commission. As we are unaware of that this investigation has been concluded, the Parish Council wishes to reiterate the Forestry Commission's advice that granting planning permission on sites which have been deforested without consent sets a dangerous planning precedent and should be avoided. Concerns over drainage and flooding have frequently been raised with this and the two previous applications. In response to previous comments made by the Parish Council on this subject, the applicant has stated that the site is located entirely in flood zone 1 and is not subject to any surface water flood risk. Perhaps not altogether surprising, because as previously stated, the site occupies an elevated position. However, the additional surface water runoff created by this development must inevitably find its way into the nearby Cobbler's Brook. For those residents who live further downstream and are already fearful because of an increased risk from flooding, a proper consideration of this issue is the very least they deserve. The issue of increased traffic in this already congested part of our village is another major concern to residents. The site can only be approached via a narrow residential road, with cars regularly parked on both sides, thus creating the equivalent of a single-track road. Any increase in traffic will only exacerbate this issue, while the mind boggles over how any safe traffic flow will be maintained during the construction phase. In conclusion, the vast number of objections clearly illustrates how unpopular this development would be to our community. Their concerns have been expressed with a clarity that resonates with a sincere desire to protect a part of our parish they call home. Therefore, on behalf of our community and parish council, I respectfully ask members of the Planning Committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bloomfield. Our third and final speaker on this application is the Ward Councillor, Councillor Michael Higgins. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the case officer for preparing a comprehensive and balanced report. I'd also like to thank Kimberly for all her work registering tonight's speakers. Like the speakers before me, I'm here tonight to speak in support of the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. As you've seen, the site has been subject to a number of applications, and now you're being asked to consider another application for this site that sits predominantly outside the Ewhurst settlement boundary. As stated in the officer's report, the proposal does not fall within one of the forms of development that may be acceptable within rural areas. National policy, the Ewhurst and Ellens Green Neighbourhood Plan, and paragraph 3.30 of Waverley's Local Plan Part 2 is clear that the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside should be safeguarded. This site has also been subject to dismissed appeal in 2023. The planning inspector at that time raised compelling reasons for refusal, most notably that the scheme's east-west layout with a central spine road directly conflicts with the linear grain of development along Maple Drakes Road. Today's revised proposal does little to address that core concern. Indeed, the built form would remain visually intrusive and alien by branching away from the road and deep into the countryside. This plot, as you've heard, is also adjacent to ancient woodland. While the buffer has been widened since the last application, serious risks remain. The future pressure to fell or manage important woodland trees would continue to be a risk, possibly due to shading or garden encroachment in the future. Accordingly, to permit development so close to ancient woodland is not sustainable or defensible, especially in light of the Forestry Commission's advice, as mentioned by Parish Councillor James Bloomfield. Now, it is accepted that the council lacks a 5-year housing land supply. However, that was also addressed by the planning inspector at the last appeal, who found that despite the lack of 5-year land supply, the harm caused by building on this site significantly outweighed any potential benefits. As a result, the proposal was found to be unacceptable by the planning inspector, and it remains unacceptable today. The revisions in this new planning application are minor and superficial. The fundamental issues of harm remain, namely that the layout and central spine road would have a significant impact on the visual amenity, character and appearance of the locality. In light of that, I urge members to uphold the officer's recommendation and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Do we have any speakers? A close call for that one. I think Rubini was half ahead in front of Councillor.
Thank you. I didn't like the way it was said about the trees being felled prior to this application. I know it's not illegal to fell trees. However, it does show a lack of respect and care for the environment, and this application is very close to the wooded forest. I also, although I've not heard this before, I gather they filled the pond in. I'm not sure the newts, mosquitoes, dragonflies and all sorts of other life were considered. I've got absolutely no idea because unfortunately the nature officer doesn't say it. On the whole, I would support the officers to refuse this because if the applicant really wants just to build houses to make money and not look at the surrounding environment, I'm sorry, but I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. What a contrast to the previous application. the fact that there's 148 objections doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, that 148 people have got it right, but it sure does in this case. I just can't think of anything positive to say about this at all. You have got a settlement boundary, you've got a neighbourhood plan which is now in place. You've got a character on Maple Street Road as you go out, you know, and to have this, you know, to sort of mow down a bungalow for no apparent reason, to go in and devastate beautiful landscape totally unnecessarily, it just goes against the grain so much. And I think, you know, everybody's pointed it out. You mentioned Sayers Croft. We've tried to protect areas near that before. And I remember the previous applications on this site. You know, there are sites which are beyond the boundary, which are surrounded by ancient woodland. They are special. They should remain special. And the fact that we have a lack of housing and supply doesn't mean that we should shove up something totally urban in a sort of beautiful space. It makes no sense in planning terms whatsoever. I really find no good points at all in this, and I have absolutely no hesitation in saying that we should support the officer's recommendation to refuse this. I think it's horrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White.
I hope I will display that I'm being conscientious, not ignorant. But could I ask the Assistant Director of Planning why this has come to committee, please?
Yes, it's because you've got 20 letters of support. So that under the scheme of delegation means I can't deal with it under delegated powers. So hence it being there, here this evening.
Thank you. Could I also ask, sorry, Terry, could I also ask Russell, I'm interested, well, the learning experience on this particular application and future. Surrey Wildlife Trust offered some conditions. Have you got have I missed those on the information we've got? Are we able to hear what those conditions are?
Apologies, but I don't have those conditions in front of me. They will be available on the planning register currently, because the application is for refusal. I didn't include those. Obviously, I think my report may have mentioned them. If you bear with me.
Yeah, they have referred to disturbance to wildlife and the risk of lighting from the properties. Yeah, I mean, that's all understood. I just wondered if they made any other specific conditions. I can look it up myself. It's no problem.
I did actually mention them in my report, actually. It was a construction environmental management plan, a landscaping ecological management plan, maintenance and management of the 25-metre buffer zone. I think a sensitive lighting management plan, biodiversity net gain, as well as securing it, the monitoring it for a legal agreement would have been a condition.
Russell, that's fine, thanks.
Yeah,
I don't want to hold up proceedings any further. It's a bit of a no-brainer, this one, I think, but thank you.
Councillor Weldon, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. I think many members will know by now that in general, my instinct is to approve housing where, unless there is real demonstrable harm. And I say that simply because if our instinct is always to approve applications which have essentially landscape grounds or outside certain boundaries, then where are we going to put our housing? And there is a dire need for more housing. However, in this particular case, much as I would like to approve it, I think the evidence against is overwhelming, and I will support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Any other speakers before we go to the recommendation? Well, the recommendation is the shortest one this evening, that permission is refused. Before you go to the voting panel in front of you, please remember, if you press the green button, you're supporting the refusal.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous. And note, I managed to say it right this time.
So that refusal is carried. We now move to the third and final application for this evening. It is 9.1 in WA 2025 00266. Land at Whitefell, 85 Busbridge Lane, Godalming. And I believe this is coming to the committee as the applicant is an employee of the council. The planning officer in this case is Dana Nixon, and I will hand over to Dana as soon as she's ready.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. That's all.
Yeah, yours is here. So if you go back into Zoom, if you go back into, yeah, yeah. That's what I was trying to point to you. So if you just click share and then share the presentation, that's what's pointing at. Yeah, click share and then you click, well, you can click that as well. And then just hit enter.
Sorry about that. This application is for the erection of an outbuilding following demolition of the existing outbuilding. And the reason it's coming to committee tonight is because the applicant is an employee of Waverley Borough Council. This is the location of the site, which is a corner plot between Busbridge Lane and Crawpits Lane in the build-up area of Godalming, also shown here outlined in blue. The proposed site plan shows the location of the outbuilding to the rear of the property, access from Crawpits Lane, and the hatched area shows the extension over the existing outbuilding in the same location. This is the existing and proposed ground floor plan. So you can see the existing garage, which is currently used for storage, and the two areas in front of the garage, which are used for parking. The proposed outbuilding will be slightly narrower, will be moved further from the boundary, but slightly deeper by about 2.5 meters into the site. And the parking provision will remain unchanged to the front of the outbuilding. These are the existing elevations, and next are the proposed elevations. So the new roof will be pitching away from the boundary. The next slide shows the location of the site on the corner plot, and the next one shows the existing outbuilding to be demolished and the current parking situation. On the existing street scene, in fact, next door to the application site, there's already a similar structure with a pitched roof. There's the must for considerations are design and impact on visual amenity, impact on residential amenity, impact on parking and ecology, and the planning balance assessment concludes that the proposal is in accordance with the development plan and the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Just important to notice there have been no representations made on this application at all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers on this application? Councillor MacLeod.
Just a question purely for interest, actually. I've got no problem with the application. I'd just be interested to know why it wouldn't qualify for permitted development.
I am not entirely sure. This is not my application. I'm presenting on behalf of someone else. But the application has been made for an outbuilding to replace an existing outbuilding. Probably more than likely it does, it is further, due to its corner location, let me go back to the site, it comes further than the building line of the host dwelling. And for permitted development, an out will have to be located beyond the building line of a dwelling. So that's most likely why it needed permission.
I don't see any more hands, so we will move to the recommendation, which is subject to conditions. Permission is granted. If you can use the console in front of you, which is ready to vote. Thank you.
Once again, Chair, unanimous.
Thank you, Kim. That application is carried then. At 22 minutes past 8, this meeting is closed.